My name is Angela Smith. I am Associate Department Chair for English and Communications. I'm also the Campus Associate Department Chair for Lansing. In the Marine Corps, I was officially a corporal and I was administrative a clerk, but I also worked unofficially as a heavy weapons instructor. I joined the United States Marine Corps after I had enrolled in college, and so I always love to share with my students that I'm a college dropout. Despite having my numerous degrees and number of experiences, I am a high school dropout, and I threw away a full ride scholarship for running at Saginaw Valley State University. No one in my family had ever been in the military, except for an uncle. My uncle Walt was in Vietnam, but he was drafted, and so he never talked about it. So I kind of say no one in my family was in the military because he never talked about it. So when I was young, I was about 16, I went to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And even though Marines don't guard the tomb, I was fascinated by that honor and that discipline and that sense of brotherhood. So I kept telling my family, I'm joining the Marine Corps. I'm joining the Marine Corps. And at the time I had long hair and I was very similar to a Barbie, and no one believed me that I was joining. So I went to college, went on a running scholarship, straight A student, worked full time. I ran cross-country track, both indoor and outdoor, and finally one year, my senior year of college, I'd had enough. So I went to the Marine Recruiter, I signed up, and I came home and I gave a bumper sticker to my father that said, "Proud parent of a United States Marine," and I left 2 weeks later. So I dropped out of college to join the Marine Corps.
Wow.
Some of the stereotypes that female Marines have to endure. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, California, the School of Infantry, which is the biggest weapons base in North America. The School of Infantry, the Marines go to boot camp, and the Marine Corps is the only branch of service that segregates men and women, even to this day. Both men and women are trained separately because they don't want any distractions. So women go to Parris Island, and men go to Camp Pendleton, or sometimes Parris Island, but they are completely separated. You don't have male drill instructors, you don't have any interactions with males whatsoever for the entire boot camp. So some of the stereotypes and things that I endured are that Marines are not smart. We're called jarheads, and meaning there's not a lot of brains. We're bullet catchers. So dealing with the fact of you're not going to get this, you don't understand. That Marines also, other branches of service and civilians always think of Marines as two-sided. One, they're the high school athletes that are washed out, or we have the stellar elite status of Marines. So there's never really in between. So you're either the washout or you're the college stud, but yet you're never in between as far as anything. So between athleticism as well as your intelligence, there's really nothing there. When I was in the Marine Corps, and I was in pre-9/11, but when I was in the Marine Corps, women could not hold any billet or MOS or job that had anything to do with combat. It wasn't until 2014 that women Marines could start to serve in a combat role. The only thing when I was in that Marines could basically do, females, was paper pushers. We could basically push the paper, the orders, the pay, those kind of things. I was also with the Marine Corps, we also had the don't ask, don't tell policy that was lifted in 2011. But back then, you couldn't serve with anyone of any sort of sexual orientation other than what was acceptable by the military. Some of the other stereotypes that I endured, that was more as a whole, but women are considered weak. Women, because of the chauvinistic aspect of the Marine Corps, women did not stand duty by themselves. Even though the men did, the women always had to have, we used to call them chauffeurs, and we always had to have a male escort us around the base, even though we were the person on duty that day. One of the biggest things that I struggled with is, even though I was an expert rifleman, and I shot the M16A2 service rifle as an expert, I could never be deemed or hold that title because I was a female. I also could not have the billet or the MOS as an instructor because I was female. So I could go out there every day and teach men how to shoot the M16. I was never allowed to have that title as a female instructor. So looking at some of the negative stereotypes, there are several positives. the fact of when you see a Marine, you often think disciplined, very hardcore, working, and that camaraderie and a leader. Sometimes that leader quality can fault you because if you think you have a Marine in a class, you're like, oh, that's my go-to person. That person is going to take charge. But sometimes that Marine may want to take a back seat and not always have to be the take charge person. If you think also about, if you think about Marines and female Marines, when I was in, they always prided themselves of the fact that the Marine Corps population is 1%. So of the entire population, only 1% can actually make it as a Marine. But then if you take 1% of that 1%, that's what a female Marine is. When I was in, there was only 4 women out of the 10,000 men stationed at the Camp Pendleton, California School of Infantry. And the other 3 worked in the Chow Hall. And I was the only one who worked out on the field with the Marines. Of those other 3 who worked in the Chow Hall, 2 of them committed suicide. One of them happened to be my bunkmate, and the other one transferred out to a more female-friendly atmosphere. So I stayed at the School of Infantry 5 of my 6 years that I was in. The one thing that I hope that people can learn from female Marines is that there are still stereotypes, and they still happen often. And being a female Marine and looking at how small of a minority that actually is, the things that we had to undergo are absolutely crazy. Even though the Marine Corps trained people differently, all the men over here and all the women over here, and then they blended them together, the Marine Corps prided itself on physical fitness tests, not only shooting a weapon, but you had to do everything that a man did except in a physical fitness test. They would argue and assert that women aren't as strong as men, so you don't have the same physical fitness standards that we had. So in the 6 years that I was in, I never lost a point to physical fitness tests, and we had to do a physical fitness test or a PT test once every quarter. And we had to do them also once a week informally, but formally once a quarter, and I never lost a point. I'm a 300 PFTer, but women did not have to run the 3 mile and as fast as what the males did. Some commanding officers throughout the years said, oh, women don't have to run 3 miles because you'll never see field time, so you only have to run 1.5 miles. You don't have to run the full 3. And women also didn't have to do push-ups. Women had to do, or rather not push-ups, pull-ups. Women did not have to do pull-ups. We had to do what was called a dead hang because our bodies are not equipped to actually do the pull-up. So instead of hurting ourselves more, we had to do what was called the dead hang. And when women were up doing that physical fitness test, the murmurs and the people talking about you and calling you weak because you had a different physical fitness standard. So I made sure when I was in, I ran the 3 miles. I made sure that I did the pull-ups, and I'd have to work on those at my own time. Everything from the sound of a woman's voice during PT singing cadence to everything from a physical fitness test to even on the rifle range. There was all kinds of scrutiny. So not only was I a minority being a female in the Marine Corps, I was also a minority being Caucasian. You often see the billboards of the Marines, and they have all the Caucasian males, the strong, the proud, the few, right? So when you're looking at a female, where I was stationed at the School of Infantry, back then, and I don't know what it is like today, but back then, you didn't have to be an American citizen to be in the armed forces, at least the Marine Corps. So I served with people from all over the world who were not American citizens. The only stipulation is you had to speak English in uniform. The problem I had with being a female Marine, it was also the minority of being Caucasian. I stood with mainly Spanish speaking. And I went 2 years without telling anyone I was fluent in Spanish because I heard the things that they said and I heard the things that they did. Or they wanted to do, rather. And so, female Marine and Caucasian in Southern California, I was a minority in both instances. So finally, everything from the overall positive stereotypes of the dedication and being strong, everything from you can't hold certain billets, you can't go to combat, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. Being a female Marine has made me who I am today. And I still stand behind the decision I made to help support the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
That's awesome.
When I was in the Marine Corps, I was what was called a POG, a person other than a grunt. So I was a paper pusher. My official title was an orders clerk. I did everything when the Marines went to boot camp. After they went to boot camp, they came over to me at the School of Infantry. I was the one that got their orders. I was the one that got them paid. And if they did any trying to do, like got married or anything like that, I was the person who processed their orders and their pay. However, the first time I went on the rifle range, because every Marine is a rifleman first, I went on the range and I didn't miss a target. And so I was called an expert shot without the title of an expert shot. So everything from the 9mm to the M16 A2 service rifle, I was an expert shooter. However, women, because they could not have the billet of a combat instructor or an instructor or a weapons instructor, because I was a woman, I never received the title. However, when I went out there every 3 months to qualify, from the gas chamber to the swim qual to PFT to the rifle range, I could outshoot every male that was there except for one. And he and I would have competition after competition after competition. The only problem was I was a female, and therefore I never received the official title of a heavy weapons instructor.
Perfect.
Okay. Despite the answers to these questions, the Marine Corps is part of my character. It is who I am, and I pride myself on once a Marine, always a Marine. The experience was that of a lifetime.